Now, military spending across Africa rose sharply in 2023, with countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan leading the surge. The DRC more than doubled its defense budget to fight rebel groups like M23 and to replace UN peacekeepers with national forces. Now, South Sudan increased its spending to manage internal instability and the growing impact of conflict spilling over from neighboring Sudan. However, this focus on military buildup comes at a cost. Vital sectors like healthcare, education, and infrastructure are being underfunded, even as millions live in extreme poverty. So greater military influence in government also raises the risk of authoritarianism and military takeovers. If billions are being poured into defense while citizens lack basic services, is Africa investing in peace or just preparing for more war? This is a question that so many people have asked. Today, I'm joined by Roy Okhidievbie. He is a security expert in Texas, UK, and also Maebel Gebremedhin. She's president of United Women of the Horn of Africa, the Horn Tigray Action Committee in New York, USA. Thank you so much for joining on the show, Maebel.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. All right, now, Maebel, just before Roy joins us, let's begin with you. Now, Africa's military spending, we've heard, jumped by 22% in 2023 to $51.6 billion. And that is the fastest regional increase globally. What do you think is driving this surge? Would you say it is a sign of preparing for more war rather than fostering peace?
Absolutely. It's a sign that these different governments, these different regimes, these different prime ministers, dictators, whatever it is that you'd like to call them, are preparing for more conflict. They're preparing for more warfare. They're preparing for more trauma. They're not preparing for a strong society. They're not preparing for a long-standing future. Instead, they are trying to take advantage of the time that they have in office. And just creating more havoc for all of us and our families.
So if you say that, you know, some have actually also said that an extra dollar spent on the military potentially crowds out spending for human development. So what particular social services are being deprioritized, and how urgent is, you know, that need on the ground?
I think that's a really silly argument to make. An extra dollar spent on the army is an extra dollar lost on education. It's an extra dollar lost on cultural enforcement for serious foundation building for our societies. It's a dollar less on nutritional value. There's more value in spending money, especially money that's coming from taxes of the society, of people that are living within the country. There's more value spending that extra dollar on the children. There's more value on spending that extra dollar on the women. There's more value on spending that extra dollar on actually building the foundation for a long-standing future instead of just constant warfare. We don't need more armies. We don't need a stronger army in any country within the continent. We need stronger education. We need stronger cultural foundation. We need stronger GBV strategies to cancel that, so that women feel much more safer. They feel like they actually have a future within the society that they live in, that they can be a part of leadership. The stronger armies are not going to be able to provide that. And we're seeing this issue across the world. This is not something that's just only happening on the continent. This is not something that's only happening in East Africa. This is something happening in the United States. This is something happening in Europe. The stronger armies are not really helping our society grow in any way.
Okay. Now, you talked about, you know, stronger armies not helping society in any way. Now, we have DRC and South Sudan, which have, you know, doubled and surged their spendings, which people have actually said that it's the fastest increases worldwide. Algeria also, thanks to oil and gas revenues, have allocated $21.8 billion. You know, do you think that these countries really can afford this spending boom when its citizens are facing extreme poverty? How do you think they can justify diverting scarce resources from humanitarian needs?
It's really, really disappointing. This is really disappointing, especially when we look at the country of South Sudan. Such a new country. There's so much hope within this country. There's so much hope around the world when we're looking at South Sudan because it's so new. That is strong in different ways. But what we're seeing is that because it was a country born from war, it is continuing to stay within this context of war. A stronger army just means a stronger war defense. And who is it that they're planning on fighting? Why is it that you need a stronger army? These children don't need to continuously see, every generation doesn't need to see a war. Every generation doesn't need to prepare for war. Instead, it would be really great, instead of Africa continuing to build its war machines, it started to give more context to these children where they can see themselves being doctors, where they can see themselves being lawyers, where they can see themselves being teachers, where they can see themselves doing something beneficial for society around them, rather than thinking those jobs, those positions are outside of their country. I would hope a South Sudanese child feels like they can grow up to be anything it is that they want to be within South Sudan, not having to leave South Sudan. We are seeing a huge problem of brain drain within the continent, and especially in East Africa and the Horn of Africa, where our smartest, our brightest, our most able and capable youth are leaving their countries because they don't feel like there's a future for them within the country that they are from. Instead, what they feel like is when they're from South Sudan, when they're from Ethiopia, when they're from anywhere, DRC, that they are going to have to fight, that their future is a future of war and some type of army recruiting. That is not what our people need. Our children need to be able to feel like they can become anything it is that they want to be and stay in the country that they are from. Otherwise, there is no long-term strategy. There is no long-term future for any country on the continent. As long as we're only putting money in armies, that's not going to happen.
I agree with you on that. Well, we're told that, so I'm being told that Roy has actually joined us now. Thank you for joining the conversation, Roy.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right. So, Roy, can you speak to us on, Africa's military spending, jumping by 22% or even more? If it's updated, speak to us on what is driving this surge, because some actually said it's like they're preparing for a war rather than making peace.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to my co-guests in the studio. Definitely it's getting glaring that the direction the global perspective is going positively on the agreements being reached on economic ties. Now, if you look at what truncated the whole thing was because there became a disagreement amongst those that were producing the de-escalate the crisis in Africa, Congo, Nigeria, and all the other areas in Africa where we have crisis, especially military crisis, conflict crisis. We must definitely look at those that produce weaponry, because it's a business. And we need to look at some of the confessions that have been made by CIA retirees, very old members of armed forces of Western nations that have come out to say we went in there to cause crisis in XYZ countries, just to be able to control the activities that are going on in such countries. And we should not forget that most of the crises going on in all of those places are also connected with control and also the economic activities going on there, mining, gold, mineral resources, and to also incurse into the diplomatic activities of such countries.
Okay. Now, speaking of this, how do you justify diverting, resources that the people really need for, humanitarian needs to the military?
Yeah. You know, we must not forget that definitely there is this control that is being done. And you know, the sad part of it that I'm moving to, that my dear sister is talking about, is going to implode in the Western nations come some years ahead, because so many of these Africans that are going into Western countries, they are holding ground, they are becoming relevant, they are going into politics, into science, into manufacturing, into production. So definitely one day accountability will come to roost.
All right, now, just before we come back to Maebel, right? Maebel was talking about South Sudan earlier, but then in South Sudan, Roy, the military budget is shrouded in secrecy, you know, with ghost soldiers, embezzled funds, and also little oversight. Is it possible to ensure accountability in an opaque defense system?
It's not possible to ensure accountability not only in the defense system, in the African procurement system, in the African governance accountability system. You know, everyone holding office in African governance, I'm not abusing African governance. This is something we grew up to meet. In the last 30 years, I've been in the environment of discussion, international discussions, even local discussions. And we have seen that procurement channels are always mostly shrouded in secrecy. And after any other government comes into power, you will discover of monies that were diverted in Africa. Accountability, especially for defense budgets, is because of the reliance on certain kind of godfatherism and criminal activities of people in the hands of affairs and illegal discussions, agreement with the procurement.
Okay, well, we seem to be having a slow network with Roy. Let's come back to you, Maebel. Now, still talking about, you know, this last question that I asked Roy about, you know, secrecy when it comes to the military budget. What do you think is holding back governments, you know, not just South Sudan, because he did say that it's not just in South Sudan, it happens in most governments as well. So what do you think is holding back these governments from submitting their data? And how can better compliance be incentivized?
Well, it's accountability. Nobody wants to be held accountable for the corruption that they're doing. And so when these budgets are in secret, nobody can do anything about it. They're able to go ahead and be free as they want to be with the dollars that are being sent their way. Again, those dollars are not theirs. They are the people's dollars. These are dollars that are made from taxes. These are dollars made from the people. And so when the people want to hold these people, the government and so forth, accountable, they can't because the budgets are secret. And so they're doing this so that there's no accountability at all. And they want to be as corruptive as possible. And it's clear as day. It doesn't matter which government it is. It doesn't matter what country it is. Corruption is what they're doing.
All right, now speaking of corruption still, you know, there have been reports of serious issues, deep-rooted issues in Democratic Republic of Congo's army, which includes poor leadership, demoralized soldiers earning only $100 US per month. There've been, you know, questions of missed meals and also desertion. I mean, do you really believe that pouring money into a, you know, in quotes, dysfunctional army actually boosts security?
Not at all. Not at all. And again, I want to remind everyone that armies are made of us. The armies are ours. We are the ones that are fighting the wars. It is not the elite. It is not the leadership. It is not the prime ministers or heads of states. The people that are in the army are our family members. They are our cousins, they are our brothers, our sisters, they are us. And so when we are hearing about these huge budgets that are going to the army, and when we hear the truth about those budgets and how the soldiers are the ones that are not benefiting in any way, and that they're being starved, and that they're being put in housing that is not real, it's leaking, there's nowhere for them to sleep, there's this and that, we know the level of corruption that's actually happening. Where is the budget really going? It's not going to the soldiers. It's not the ones who are actually fighting the wars. It's not the ones who are supposed to be protecting the people. Instead, it's going to the very, very top. And so again, it's more corruption, and it just goes back to the point that more money to the army is not beneficial to society in any way.
All right. Let's come back to you, Roy. Thank you so much for reconnecting with us. And let's still talk about the corruption that's happening, in the military, just as Maebel has actually said, the challenges that some of these soldiers actually face. And this has actually been focused on the DRC, but I know that most African soldiers, face similar issues as well, talking about poor leadership, demoralized soldiers earning very little per month, missed food, and also desertion. What do you have to say about that?
Thank God the internet is getting better. Unfortunately, it's so sad. Let me tell you something. Most of the time, we find ourselves in a situation where we covert resources for our personal aggrandizement. And we share these resources with people that are supposed to come into the accountability parameters. We expect the judiciary to put an eye on what we are doing. We expect the Ministry of Defense to put an eye. We expect the Senate, the House of Representatives to ask for accountability. And most of all of these people just simply switch to those the Department of Defense to ask what is the need for us. And this is where we find ourselves. And when the president, who the box lies on their table to ask for accountability from all the institutions that are supposed to hold defense to accountability, he is thinking of his next election, and he's thinking, how many people are you going to bring? How many voters are you going to give me from your constituency? So it's a circle of deceit and failure of governance that allows this kind of expanded budgets that does not really get to the military personnel or provide the defense strategy capacity that should meet the insecurity in the land. And don't forget that insecurity is not only to be dealt with by military weaponry. You have the judiciary and other agencies.
Okay. Now, still on you before we come back to Maebel, right? Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which are now under juntas, together spend like $2.4 billion on their militaries. Now, how do we interpret this surge in spending by regimes that actually came to power via coups? Roy.
The concern that we should be looking at most is what is the relevance of AU, the African Union? What is the relevance of the ECOWAS? I was one of those soldiers that were utilized under the rehabilitation of African military might into the ECOMOG,
Hello, Roy. All right, now let's hear from you, Maebel. Same question. Considering that these three countries are under military juntas already, and they spend so much on their militaries, how do we interpret this particular increase in spending by, these military regimes?
I understand. I understand why they would spend as much as they would, especially because they're still in the process of forming the governments that they'd like to have within their countries. But it's really hard to excuse at the end of the day. I understand that these countries were a coup is the reason that they're in place, but at the end of the day, a starving child is not going to look at the army and say, "Oh, I'm so glad that you got that extra money." You know what I mean? Like it really is a very, very minimal benefit to the rest of society. And so I hope that while they're planning on making their armies as large as possible, there's also planning for the future of the rest of their country. That it just, we've seen it time and time and time again in many, 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 many countries that when more money is spent on the military post-coup, it does not benefit society. Instead, a lot of conflict comes. We saw it with the Derg regime in Ethiopia when the military took over through coup and got rid of Haile Selassie and that administration, that government, essentially, the people did not benefit. Instead, there was a lot of starvation, there was a lot of crimes, there was a lot of atrocities that happened. And so I'm really hoping, that's all I can do at this time, is to hope that they are also planning on doing other things for society instead of just making really
speaking of those atrocities that you actually mentioned, the DRC remains among the highest recruiters of child soldiers in the world, and also sexual violence continues, to be used as a weapon. Do you think that these military interventions are doing more harm or good?
I think it's a lot more harm. And I will say that 1,000 times. I wrote about this, about conflict-related sexual violence in the DRC and throughout the Horn of Africa for the New York Times in an op-ed last year. And it's something that is really, really horrible. And it's something that continues to happen throughout Africa, but especially in countries like the DRC. The DRC has been facing issues with conflict-related sexual violence, which is rape used as a strategy of war. And so when we're in conflict and rape is being used as a weapon, it is being used as a weapon against women more so than anyone else, but also young girls, young boys, some men, the elderly. It is being used across society. And the way that rape works is that it doesn't affect the person who was raped only, it affects everyone around them. We are hearing stories of people who are being raped through incest. These soldiers are coming in and forcing their grandfathers, fathers, brothers to rape their sisters, daughters, granddaughters in the home in front of everyone. That affects everybody. Everybody has just experienced a different form of rape. This is horrible, and it has not stopped. DRC has been experiencing conflict-related sexual violence for over 20 years, and nobody's really talked about it. It has not gotten global attention. It deserves global attention. These women deserve global attention. It is unfair that our women, our Black women, our African women continue to be raped, starved, and harmed in this way, and no one cares. We cannot continue this. And so when we're putting more money in armies, we're putting more money for war, that means more women are going to be raped, more girls are going to be raped, more elderly are going to be raped. We have in Tigray, which is the most northern nation of Ethiopia, nation state, over 130,000 women, reported, these are people who came forward and talked about it with different agencies, reported experiencing rape during conflict. And so those are the ones that came forward. There's even more that didn't come forward out of the taboo, fear, security. Women are still being raped today on the borders. I'm sorry.
The stigma as well is what I'm saying.
I'm sorry.
I said stigma.
Yes, the stigma, exactly. There's a lot of stigma when it comes to any conversations about sex in general. And so when it comes to sexual violence, it's even more stigmatized. Yesterday was the International Day of Elimination of Sexual Violence and Conflict. It's the 11th year of that day, and still no change has happened. This is a holiday that the UN celebrates every year, and nothing is changing. And so when the previous guest was speaking about the AU is not doing anything for Africans. And I will say that 1,000 times. The African Union is not doing anything for Africans. And it's really disappointing We've seen it over and over in different forms of conflicts. They do nothing. They would like to maybe be known as an entity that is actually helping the people on the continent, the people who care about each other on the continent and outside of the continent, but they're not doing anything. And we're seeing that more and more and more when it comes to women's issues, when it comes to children's issues, and when it comes to issues like this, where there's conflict everywhere. They're just quiet as can be until it gets to a point where the West or the UN itself is starting to pay a little more attention. The AU will then speak up. But conflict-related sexual violence, rape, different atrocities similar to that, aid being withheld, aid being sold on the black market, just starvation, different atrocities happen during these wars, and our people are the ones who are experiencing these crimes. While the governments put more and more money, quote unquote, more and more money into the army, when in reality, they're putting more and more money into the generals, the leadership of these armies, but not into the soldiers, not to the people. The people are just having to die and watch people's pockets get fat. And so it's a very, very unfair thing, and it's time that we stop as much as we can.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I'd actually love to ask if you have any final thoughts that you would love to present before we wrap up. That is for you.
Well, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Maebel, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying thank you. Thank you for having me. And I really do hope that some change will come our way. We need it more desperately than ever. We're seeing what's happening in the West. And while that's happening in the West, we have the ability to change what happens on the continent. And so, God willing, it'll happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maebel Gebremedhin, President of United Women of the Horn Tigray Action Committee. And I would also love to thank our guest, even though we couldn't wrap up with him, talking about Roy Okhidievbie, security expert, for joining us and speaking on this.